The first white paper that I wrote was called Interconnection Strategies for ISPs. This white paper answered the question, do exchange points make sense? It takes a look at using point-to-point circuits for interconnecting ISP networks together, or bringing in circuits or dark fiber into an exchange point, centrally located so that the ISPs can interconnect their networks using private cross-connects. The next white paper that I wrote was called Internet Service Providers and Peering, and this one by far is the most widely read and distributed white paper describing specifically peering. This talks about the definitions that are used in the peering community, along with the process that ISPs go through to determine with whom they would like to peer, and if they don't want to peer with somebody, why they don't want to peer. And finally, this white paper talks a little bit about exchange points and and why people choose to use exchange points or not. The next white paper I looked at was called A Business Case for Peering, primarily focused on the financial motivation for peering. This also describes, in short, the definitions being used by the peering community, but really the audience is a CFO that has to explain why they want to use a port on a router for a non-revenue generating activity. The next white paper I focused on was really for the content providers in the group. That was the folly of peering traffic ratios. This paper talks about the arguments on both sides of the table when content providers want to peer with eyeball-heavy ISPs, and the eyeball-heavy ISP says, no, I don't want to peer with you, your ratios will mess me up. So this talks about the strongest arguments on both sides for using peering ratios as a discriminator to determine with whom to peer. The next white paper I took a look at is called the Peering Simulation Game, and this white paper is really more of a game that I do at conferences. This brings 4 people from the audience up on stage to play the role of peering coordinator that builds out an ISP network and builds into exchange points, and at the exchange point they can negotiate peering. And the dynamics and the costs associated with peering and such get played out in this interaction. So the audience can really get a flavor for the types of interactions that happen when ISPs decide they want to peer with each other or not. The next white paper I'll point you to is the great public versus private peering debate, peering at 10 gigabit per second. This is really a follow-on to the business case for peering, focusing more on the large-scale interconnection that we're seeing with a lot of this video coming in play. But fundamentally, the question of public versus private peering gets exposed because you need to aggregate enough small peering sessions over a public fabric to make it financially worthwhile when compared to using inexpensive cross-connects within an exchange point building. The Art of Peering, the Peering Playbook, is one of the most fun presentations to give at a conference because here I document the tricks of the trade, what the smartest people in the world do when they get either a no response from a peering request or they get no response from a peering request. And here are about 20 tactics that I learned from the field the seasoned peering coordinator would use in order to obtain peering where they otherwise would not be able to get peering. The Evolution of the U.S. Peering Ecosystem white paper talks about the cable companies and the large-scale content companies interconnecting their networks together around the 2002 timeframe. And it is also in this white paper that I introduce, I guess I should say, reclaim the terms Tier 1 ISP, Tier 2 ISP, and content provider. I introduce definitions for these different types of players in the ecosystem, along with the motivations and corresponding behaviors that are observed in the peering ecosystem. This white paper is a good read and it is used in universities as well. But I think by far the most widely read and discussed white paper I've ever written is called Video Internet, the Next Wave of Massive Disruption to the U.S. Peering Ecosystem. And this white paper really focuses on an issue that came up from a lot of different angles. The large-scale content guys that are distributing video across the net tell me that they're unable to get sufficient capacity in any single location to get their content out across the internet. They need to spread their traffic around. And after I heard that story, about a dozen times, I started documenting the stories that I heard and the reasons and the motivations, and I started circulating the idea that maybe this is something that ought to be discussed and explored. So as it turns out, there are four main types of ways that companies can distribute video across the internet. One is to use transit, another is to use a CDN, another is to use transit with some peering, and the fourth is to use a peer-to-peer system. And I created business models that can be applied to each one of these different mechanisms, so we can compare side to side which one works most effectively, which is most cost effectively. And it's interesting, this white paper has been discussed primarily, I think, because video is a very sexy topic, but also because video traffic is so enormous, just so voluminous, that it has a significant impact on the underlying internet infrastructure. So this is one that I've been circulating around most recently.